research methodologies when conducting the qualitative research. So of course, we're going to be talking about the grounded theory method. Now, the grounded theory method in the very general sense, or the very basic definition of it, is of course the amalgamation of the main concern of the population in which you intend to conduct the research into, and of course, how the concern is resolved or processed. So, we need to highlight the word concern. The main concern, identifying what the problem is, and of course, what are the solutions that is actually responsive to the already presented problems. So it's as easy as that. Now, to further expound on this, the grounded theory method is usually used mostly and surprisingly by entrepreneurs and of course education leaders in terms of identifying what are the problems that might exist in a certain community, and what certain solutions might present themselves in the midst of all these problems. So, in the grounded theory method, I'd like to give an authentic example coming from my experience as a volunteer teacher to the indigenous communities coming from Mindanao. So usually I was actually one of the program coordinators that were responsible for conducting various researches in various communities. Therefore, we conducted various community surveys as regards their most basic necessities, whether they had schools, whether they had hospitals nearby, and whatnot. So mind you, the context of the mountaintops, the context and the situation of the indigenous communities are actually realizably not that actually subpar and essentially far-flung communities that are very distant, relatively distant from basic social services such as education and of course health. So in response to that, the primary research format that we conducted, of course, is the feasibility study. So the feasibility study is actually one of the best examples on how the grounded theory method is actually applied. Coming from the words grounded theory, it actually calls for the idea of social relevance and social responsiveness. So let's say, for example, that the feasibility study that I would like to conduct is, of course, developing a non-formal school. Let's say, for example, I want to develop a non-formal school for an indigenous community. So, of course, I would like to get data coming from the number of families that come from a certain tribal community, the number of sitios, or essentially the number of communities that are present nearby that might benefit from a certain center point if ever I were to establish a school nearby. So with that being said, I am already asking necessary questions that might answer the need and of course might provide reasons for developing a certain project, for developing a certain social service project. So, that being said, we could actually use feasibility studies in a wide array of scenarios. Like for example, the government itself is actually one of the most practicing entities that actually writes feasibility studies. Why? Because the fact that they actually produce various government projects, they already present themselves, or rather they already present to the public a feasibility study that discusses certain problems that the government actually wants to respond to. Let's say, for example, a road widening project. A road widening project may be responsive for areas that do not have any formal roads or do not necessarily have concrete roads, or roads that are in dire need of repair. So, by pursuing a project, they first identify the main concern or the initial problem in which they want to answer. And of course, in that project proposal, in that feasibility study, they actually propose a certain solution on how they wish to address the problem that has presented themselves, the problem that has presented itself in the study. So by doing so, they are already able to provide various proposals for various projects. Let's say, for example, road widening, for other communities that do not have sufficient water supplies. We also have proposals for hydroelectric power plants and others like that. So, in the idea of pursuing feasibility studies, another name for a feasibility study might be rendered as a project proposal. So a project proposal, of course, is something that is of course a proposal that first needs to identify what needs to be solved in the first place, and of course what's the underlying solution that comes after realizing what the problem is. So, with that, another form or another field that usually conducts feasibility studies are businesses. Businesses that actually want to respond to a certain community. Let's say, for example, a clothing business. You identify first the audience you wish to address in terms of establishing the business. Let's say, for example, a clothing business designated for a clothing business brand that is responsive for youth age ranges, and of course who are heavy enthusiasts of anime. So Japanese anime, Japanese manga, etc., etc. All enthusiasts, all mangaka, all Japanese connoisseurs, if I may refer to them. They could actually be one potential force in which entrepreneurs could actually tap into. And once they actually identified whom they want to render the service to, they actually present themselves with various references that actually justify why they need to establish the project in the first place. So, in establishing a clothing line with anime themes, you actually need to maximize just how many of the youth are actually influenced by anime. Just how many of the youth are actually patronizing anime in the first place. Because in other cases you can't really sell something that's not really trending, right? So of course you need to actually prove that your project proposal, or essentially your business proposal, will not be put into vain. Therefore, the grounded theory method is also applied in various entrepreneurial formats, in various entrepreneurial opportunities, and of course operations. So, aside from the feasibility study, there are also formats in which the grounded theory method is also used. We'd like to refer to them as, of course, the action research. So the action research, as most of you are not necessarily aware of, is a research study that are required to be published by most teachers. The action research itself is a mandatory research article that needs to be presented by by teachers for the sake of improving their pedagogy, the way they teach, and of course how students actually manage to appreciate the learning content that they often receive. So, in the action research, what the teachers actually consider is, of course, the various learning types that are present inside a classroom. Because for one thing, not all students learn the same. Not all students learn the same way, and of course, not students all share the same intellectual rate. So of course, the teacher needs to be fully aware of that, and of course needs to present himself or herself with relevant statistics, relevant data that mostly would come from the evaluated grades. Now, the teacher would also assess how the student is actually relating with the learning material. Because for most teachers, they actually take the very fact that they have various activities in class. In a single 1 hour class, they already have at least 3 activities the major purpose is to cater the the various learning types that are present in most students. There are students who are kinesthetically inclined, who are more inclined doing physical activities. Therefore, groupings would most likely be the most effective way to do that. Other formats would be considered as the numerical or logical learners, the the logistical learners, the linguistic learners, and others like that. Those who have the higher capacity to handle learning content using words or numbers respectively. So, by considering such, they are already developing what problems need to be addressed. And of course, what certain solutions or what certain adjustments do teachers actually need to take. Now, for example, let's take the curriculum development idea of the K-12 itself, and as well as how it was applied here in the Philippines in the first place. So, the K-12 curriculum is actually a response to synchronizing the quality of education in the Philippines to the international community, because by far the Philippines is one of the remaining countries, but back in 2013 the Philippines was one of the remaining countries that were actually left with only a 10-year requirement for the basic education completion program. So, unlike other international communities which renders at least 12 years of basic education, the Philippines is by far left with discrimination, especially when it comes to working abroad. Like for example, for those who manage to finish a master's degree here in the Philippines, they often end up with various blue-collar jobs, like for example, domestic helpers, taxi drivers, or at the very least, caregivers and others like that. So Filipinos don't necessarily receive as much credit in the international community, due primarily to the merits or the quality of education in which the Philippines actually offers. Therefore, the K-12 curriculum was done out of the sake of aligning these standards, the international standards, aligning Philippine standards, and heightening them to cater to international demands as well. So, in the process of doing so, the matters of employment, the matters of aligning educational experience, and of course professional background, or of course the professional integrity of the job applicant himself, would not be put into such racial discrimination as well as academic apartheid when when they choose to work abroad. So that's one thing that the action research might present itself into. Another example, perhaps that could be rendered as a relevant and by far an easier way to conduct action research, is action researches for teachers who handle students with special needs. So, in terms of students with special needs, of course, they are varied in terms of their disability and others like that. Also, you need to consider the learning styles in which the various students with special needs actually possess. So, by doing so, the teacher is already aware of the major strengths as well as the major weaknesses of most of their students, despite the diversity of special needs that are present in the classroom. So of course, writing an action research could somehow help the teacher in return, because by doing so, by conducting the action research, the teacher is already able to make necessary adjustments as regards the need for most of the as regards the need, or as regards the specifications that fit a student with special needs. So, the action research, the feasibility studies are actually one of the major approaches in research in which the grounded theory method is actually applied into. So again, to generalize the idea, the grounded theory method is essentially an amalgamation or the combination of identifying what the problem is, and of course, how you intend to answer the problem, how you intend to answer what the problem presents itself into. So, that being said, I would like to conclude this lecture. If This video lecture has been helpful for you, please do not hesitate to leave a like below. And of course, if you somehow found this very helpful for you, and you think other people and you think other people might benefit from this lecture, please do not hesitate to share this video to them. Now, with that being said, I would like to thank all of you for continuously participating in most of my in most of my video lectures. And of course, thank you very much. Stay safe and stay care.